Today is September 21st, 2022, and we are at the virtual candidate forum for the East Bay Municipal Utilities District, Ward 3. I'm Jennifer Nixon, a member of the League of Women Voters of Piedmont. We're pleased to have as co-sponsors today the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County, Diablo Valley, and Oakland, as well as Piedmont. The League of Women Voters is a trusted membership organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. The League participates in issue advocacy and voter education. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues or ballot measures. This forum is presented by the education arm of the League, which does not take positions or advocate for them. Before we introduce the candidates, I have a few logistical items to review for everyone. The candidates and co-sponsoring leagues have all agreed to participate under guidelines set for this forum. Microphones are muted for everyone except the candidates and the moderator. Video images will show the candidates and your moderator. We're recording this forum and we'll be posting it via the League of Women Voters of Piedmont's YouTube channel and website. The links to all the co-sponsors will be posted in the chat box. Our candidates for the director office are Mark Sedahl and Marguerite Young. Good to see you both tonight, and thank you for being here. I'd like to next present a bit of background information about this office before we begin. EBMUD has a 7-member board of directors publicly elected from wards within the EBMUD service area. The board is committed to developing a policy, all policies through an open public process guided by the EBMUD mission statement. Under the direction of the board and general manager, EBMUD staff work 24/7 from party reservoir and through a web of pipes and facilities. EBMUD supplies mountain water to East Bay customers. Every day of the year, EBMUD treats wastewater before it's discharged to the bay. The district recycles water, produces energy from waste, and works with residents and businesses to keep pollutants from reaching the bay. You are here because you want to make smart choices when you vote. The League is here to help you make a smart choice using a few simple rules to be sure you have the information you'll need to help you make that decision through a fair and balanced process. It's important to the League to give the community a voice, which is why we invited the community to send us questions for the candidates in advance. Those questions have been sorted by a team of League leaders to avoid duplicate questions and to select those questions that are most important to the community. We will not be taking questions during this forum. The Q&A and chat features have been turned off to minimize distraction. I'll remind the candidates of a few key ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. To keep the discussion flowing, candidates will be expected to keep answers to the questions to 1.5 minutes. These will be timed, and the timer clock can be seen by all. In order to be fair to the other candidates, if you run over, I'll need to cut you off. We'll switch up the order so each candidate has a chance to answer first. I flipped a coin a little while ago and Marguerite will be going first. At the end of the Q&A section, each candidate will have 1 minute to provide a closing statement. Now, let's begin with our first candidate, Marguerite, for your opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone at the League of Women Voters chapters from around the East Bay. My name is Marguerite Young. I'm an Oakland resident, have been for 20 plus years in Oakland, but I'm an EBMUD customer pretty much all of my life except some years away in college and on the East Coast. I've spent most of my life as an environmental activist and labor union leader, working to advocate for working people for water quality and for climate action. The role of East Bay MUD Director is one that I sought 8 years ago after many years of being interested in it, and pledged to do several things as part of that. One was to make sure that we protected the McCollum River. The second is that we accelerated our infrastructure expansion. And the third area was to make sure that our water was clean, safe, and affordable for all. In those 8 years, we have protected the McCollum River. We have doubled our infrastructure replacement. We have led on climate action and are well prepared for drought. And through the pandemic, we kept water on for everyone. And I and several other board members led the effort to end shutoffs. During that pandemic, after the pandemic, we will not shut off water. We've expanded our customer assistance program, which is another key tenet of my time at East Bay MUD. We have more to do. Climate, the Bay, managing our watershed for wildlife protection, et cetera. So I'm here to do another 4 years and looking for support from all of you. Thank you.
Thanks. Mark?
Good evening. My name is Mark Seedall. I'm a water utility planner. I'm running for the East Bay Municipal Utility District Board to help direct the efficient oversight of this large and critical water agency. Water is something we all need and use, yet it is increasingly less available and more costly over time. My experience over the past 20 years at the Contra Costa Water District as a principal planner makes me uniquely qualified for this position of key importance. I've worked my entire career for public utilities that manage not only water, but also natural gas and power. I have experience with all the major Bay Area utilities, have prepared comprehensive environmental reviews, and have obtained permits and grant funding from state and federal regulators for complex water infrastructure projects. I'm a native Californian and graduated with a BS from UC Davis and an MS from UC Berkeley in agricultural resource economics. I care a great deal about trying to make our community a better place to live and work in, and I highly value our natural resources. Should you elect me to the board, I will work to ensure that improvements are made quickly, cost-effectively, and sustainably. Please vote for Mark Seedall to be your next most responsive and accountable representative to the East Bay MUD Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for the candidates to answer your questions. Mark, you will go first, then Marguerite. Marguerite, you'll go first for the next question, and so on. I'll cue you. And there's 7 questions. This first question has 2 parts, and I'm happy to repeat it for the second person if you don't catch it all. What is your plan to protect and conserve the district's high quality water supply for uses requiring very clean water and optimizing the use of recycled or treated water for other purposes? Are there any plans to implement alternative delivery systems for different uses so that water reuse can be ramped up or used to replenish water supply?
I highly favor trying to improve East Bay MUD's recycling of wastewater for industrial, in particular industrial facilities. They currently are using some recycled water for industrial customers and some residential customers, but we need to do more of that. And it's an important and resilient plan for the future because it doesn't rely on the mountains and the rain and the climate. It uses what's already going out into the waste, and it hopefully improves the impacts to San Francisco Bay. So I really hope that East Bay MUD can more quickly accelerate the use of recycled water, in particular at the Chevron refinery, where I know they've been working to do some recycling, but more is needed. And at the Phillips refinery up in Rodeo, where I think they're still working to try to get that system going. So those are really important systems, and those need to be a key component and accelerate it now to get to make more fresh water available to the remaining East Bay Mud customers. Thank you.
Marguerite?
Great. Thank you. First, let me start upstream. Protecting our water source is critical, and that's why East Bay Mud devotes so much attention to watershed management, both upstream and down in our local watershed to protect water quality. Second, our conservation efforts have been extraordinarily successful. We are a third larger in population, and our water use is far below what it was in 1977. I think we can do more in that regard. Second, I believe we need to expand the use of gray water and on-site water reuse, so that the water doesn't have to make it all the way to the wastewater treatment plant. Third, East Bay Mud has a ambitious recycled water plan. Chevron is our largest recycled water customer. We have 2 plants that serve Chevron with all the water that we can provide them. We are in active negotiations finally with Phillips to do so. We are recycling all the water we can with our DSRSD out in Dublin, San Ramon for landscaping use, and have a East Bay Shore project that is also taking place and under expansion.
Thank you. All right, the second question, and Marguerite, you'll answer this first. What can be done to instill a sense of individual responsibility to implement conservation measures and ensure an equitable distribution of water resources at the residential level? For example, water used for lawns in some of our wealthier communities seems very wasteful compared to other more essential uses. Can watering lawns be outlawed, or can there be mandatory watering restrictions to limit these wasteful practices?
Thank you. So right now we are in the second year of a drought that only ended a drought a couple of years ago. We do have a tiered water rate system, which does charge more for water above a certain level. I believe we actually need to create a tier that rewards conservation better. Right now, many customers on the west side of the hills use less water flow than their fixed charge, and so the incentive for conservation isn't as strong as it could be, even though they're already not using very much water. So we have a cost of service study coming up during these next 4 years. One of the reasons I want to stay on the board is to look at how we can within the bounds of the Constitution, address water rates at a conservation level and recognize that as supply, which would also dramatically help our low-income customers better afford water. I'd also like to see our rebates and incentives expanded. I don't think we can outlaw lawns, but we're making it very attractive for people to switch over. We also right now have the excessive use penalty, which puts a premium or a penalty on the very, very high users. And that will go up if we enter another year of drought.
Thank you. Mark?
The first thing that I think about when I think about conservation is having a better understanding of how we're using our water. And in that regard, I think about having a smart meter so I can track how much water I'm using at my house on a real-time basis, and I can figure out whether I'm having a leak or not. And right now, there are no smart meters really, or very limited smart meters available to East Bay Mud customers. They haven't adapted that technology yet, but that would be a tremendous value to customers who have landscape areas, so they can understand how much water they're using, and if there's problems with those landscape systems, they can remedy the problems by having some real-time information. Secondly, the other thing I know is I think a lot of these customers would be more motivated to switch from from lawns and higher water use landscapes to less intensive landscapes if the rebates and incentives to switch over were more straightforward, more and were easier to understand, and were more available. As a customer myself, I struggle with EBMUD's program. It's not simple. It doesn't appear to be advantageous necessarily. So anyway, metering, smart meters, and better rebates will help customers reduce landscape irrigation.
Thank you both. This is the third question. What is the status of tertiary treatment, filtration at wastewater treatment facilities and reuse of the treated water, such as reinjection into aquifers or reservoirs, or for residential, agricultural, commercial, or industrial uses?
I'm first this time, I think, right? Yes.
No, it's Mark.
I think I'm first.
No,
Oh, Mark's
it's-
first.
I'm
Sorry.
It's Mark.
That's okay.
Mark.
Start the clock over.
Sorry, I should have cued you.
This is in terms of tertiary treatment. Yeah, okay. More needs to be done. I do think more needs to be done, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of recycling. I do think if more tertiary treated water could be created, then more recycling could be implemented. And of course, the problem with that is it's very expensive. The subject of groundwater recharge, say with tertiary treated water, is also have to be dealt with very carefully. I know there are plans, I think over in the San Leandro area, to maybe inject some of this kind of water into the ground. There's a lot of issues with that because there are environmental justice issues in those locations where the residents are concerned that more disadvantaged communities would be exposed for having less favorable water. But I also think the first thing that has to get done, as I said earlier, is the refineries and the industrial customers need to get all of their service, all of their needs off of fresh water onto recycled water. And if that requires tertiary treatment, that should be done. It's a resilient way that has a lot of certainty for the future.
Marguerite?
Thank you. The issue of tertiary treated or treating water to potable use standards is one that is a subject of much scrutiny and research at the state level, and there are state regulations that are still in promulgation about how to do that. We are looking at, and I think we need to continue looking at how to tie in, for instance, to Central San, which is the out in Martinez, that comes very close to our McCullamy Aqueduct pipeline, to potentially store water for ultimate use and further treatment to drinking water standards for our customers. We have looked at, and I think we need to continue looking at whether there is a way to bring a pipeline up to Upper San Leandro Reservoir, or potentially through on the potable side. Both of those things are years and years and years away. You know, in the meantime, we are doing groundwater injection out in the San Joaquin Valley. That's with raw water, which we're using to recharge overdrafted basins. Mark mentioned the San Leandro Bayside pilot project, which is a small project that we're potentially could increase, and the industrial needs, you know, obviously as well.
Okay.
They're all expensive.
All right, and Margaret, you're first on this fourth question. What efforts are being made to reduce discharge of treated water to the bay?
So this is you know, the Clean Water Act, when it was first passed, it implemented the first real treatment standards focused on disinfecting for pathogens and getting those out of the water, and has focused on industrial pollutants, et cetera. The problem the big problem in the bay is nutrients, which means poop, basically, and pee. All of our toilets flushing, and currently is not there are not standards that have been set to address it. There's a big research project going on. I am dedicating my next 4 years at EBMUD to doing everything that we can to reduce the nutrients going into the bay that were not just ours, but throughout the Bay Area that contributed so heavily to the fish kill that happened 2 weeks ago. This is a vexing problem for many water utilities around the country. And I think we also need to think out of the box about ways to reduce nutrient input into our wastewater treatment plants with things like, again, on-site reuse, getting it before it goes to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, Mark.
An interesting question. One thing I think about, if we could start over again, which we may not be able to, and treat all of this, more of this recycled water, more of this treated water, or this sewage water that goes out to the bay, and get it back into a purple pipe system, like it's being done or has been done with the whole development of this family-known development, newer residential development where they have the foresight to, and newer developments have this foresight to include purple pipe. If more of that could be done to actually serve existing customers, that could really help alleviate the amount of discharge going out into the bay. And I come back to, we've got to get those industrial refineries, all of them, off of fresh water onto recycled water as an immediate benefit, not waiting years or decades to get that done. We need to get that done as fast as possible. I'm really pleased to have it zoom on that quickly, but that is so important. And the same thing can be said for the Central Sand wastewater plant, where they have 2 refineries near it that are still using fresh water. So those are things that can all be done to help improve and reduce impacts to San Francisco and what's happening from the effluent not well treated going into our rivers and into the country.
Thank you. All right, Mark, you're first for this 5th question. What are the most challenging pollutant? What is the most challenging pollutant to test for and remove from wastewater? What are the emerging chemicals of concern that are causing grief for East Bay mud? And how do you keep ahead of the curve as new pollutants are identified?
Well, I'm not a chemist, so I'm not sure I can exactly identify what the worst constituent is, but as Marguerite said earlier, clearly nitrates and human waste, not well treated and managed into the bay are a huge problem. I come back to, we've got to get more of this water treated in a way that brings it closer to potable usage, potential potable usage, or at least recycled usage, rather than, and so we reduce the amount of discharge. And that's one of those, as much as I can answer in this particular question.
Marguerite?
Thank you. Mark, just briefly, it's hard to hear you. I don't know if other people are having trouble, but
I'll get a little closer.
So in terms of, we have a lab on site at our wastewater treatment plant that tests all the time for things that are regulated and as well as unregulated. In terms of things that we're concerned about, it's everyone's concerned about, something called PFAS, which is ubiquitous. And our efforts there actually are less about treating PFAS and more about getting it out, preventing it. Pollution prevention is the best solution to pollution. And as we talked about in the last question, the nutrient issue is a big one. I think we need to be looking at constructed wetlands for treatment and the feasibility of that. The estimates for us are between 10 million or 100 million and $1 billion to treat nutrients. So it is a huge expense. we're talking 3, 4, 5 times, the rate that we pay now for wastewater. So it's not something that, we can undertake lightly, right? We've got to figure out a course that makes sense. And that's true whether we're recycling a lot or doing other kinds of treatment modalities. So
okay, thank you.
It's very expensive.
Thank you. All right, so Marguerite, you're going to go first on this next one, number 6. The wastewater facility was built in the 1970s with federal money. That money is gone, but the facility needs seismic retrofit. The sewer system needs upgrading too, as there have been failures. How would you prioritize these issues in the capital plan, along with the other issues already discussed?
Everybody wants to talk about wastewater today. We're in the middle of a big drought and everybody wants to talk about the wastewater, which is great. So right now, we're in the middle of a big wastewater master plan, recognizing that the facility needs major upgrades. At the same time, it's important to remember that our anaerobic digestion powers the system and pays for itself, as I think you mentioned in the introduction. This is something that we've got are baking into the 20-year capital improvement plan, and in our rate projections that we feel, sort of confident we can tackle. We've also got to think about how climate change will affect our ability to manage that plant, because it's at the foot of the bay, which is, where it's at the bottom, where everything flows to. So that is another aspect that has to be looked at. Our interceptor system, is also the strength of our waste has increased as people have used less water. So it's more corrosive, and it's going faster than we than we had predicted. So we're going to need to move more swiftly. We also need to work with our cities that operate the sewers to make sure that they're upgrading their pipelines and sewer laterals as well, which is a big element of our program.
Thank you, Mark.
When you need a huge amount of money for infrastructure, and this appears to be a huge investment, then what needs to be thought about is trying to go to our both federal and state legislature and seeing whether we can get funding directly from the federal and the state government to help jumpstart a major capital repair to the old infrastructure. And there are so many benefits from this particular type of state and federal investment to the environment that they may well be willing to help support EBMUD in its efforts to improve that wastewater facility. And I got to believe, if I were there as a director, I would be helping to push EBMUD's lobbying efforts to go and work on getting funding to help make these kinds of huge capital investments that are so beneficial to our entire Bay Area region and the climate and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, to our seventh and last question. Mark, you'll go first. As director, how would you try to influence district management to incorporate community priorities into its capital program budgeting process?
Well, one thing I really think is important is to make it easier for the public to provide input to EBMUD. And in particular, when there's a rate increase plan, the rules are very constrained in terms of how the public can make comment to the rate increases, and unless there's a large number of written comments from half the population, really there's no emphasis on the part of the management or the to basically make any changes to the program and to the plan of raising the cost. And so you need to incentivize and look carefully at all of the planning that is being done at the utility and make sure it's the right planning. And that's what I would be doing as the director. I would be looking carefully at all of the planning that they're doing and making sure it's the right planning and it's not leading us down a path of actually bad investments or costly investments that make it more difficult to take care of East Bay MUD in the long run. So that's what I'd be focused on as director and trying to respond to the public. And I think recycling is clearly something the public is very interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. Marguerite?
Thank you. During my 8 years on the board, I have pushed and succeeded in increasing the public participation that takes place for all of our project planning, whether that's offloading soil from Briones Reservoir that we've stored there, or engaging in the upgrade of a major treatment plant, or dealing with crime issues around one of our facilities. Our public affairs staff has gone the extra mile to do outreach to include neighbors and members of the public and to hear them. When we reviewed our watershed master plan to consider including bicycles, we convened evening meetings that had hundreds of people participating in them. Those happened because I made sure that they were going to happen. So we've done better. I think we can do more. We are restricted in some of our processes by what's called Proposition 218, which governs our rate setting and sets the rules that Mark was talking about. And so we do, we've started on Zoom like everybody else. Can we do more? I would love us to do more. I've had evening meetings and we usually get 5 or 6 people showing up. I'd love to see more people participating.
Thank you. All right, now the candidates will make closing statements. We will reverse the order that we began with. Mark, you'll go first.
Okay, why vote for Mark Seedall? I have a strong background in utilities, not only water, but natural gas and power. I am very concerned with large utility rate increases over time. Rates over the past 8 years have increased at 8% on average per year, while the rate of inflation is only around 3%. Rates for a typical home west of the hills within Ward 3 could rise from around $70 per month, presently to over $500 per month by 2050. Rates east of the hills could increase to $1,000 a month by 2050. I want to make sure East Bay MUD does not make a major investment that causes rates to increase quickly and limits near-term critical infrastructure improvements. Vote for Mark Seedall if you want a director on East Bay MUD's board who knows how water utility works from the inside out. That is, from the bottom looking up. Working at an adjacent water utility, I can hit the ground running and help refresh East Bay MUD's planning immediately. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to present my reasons for running for the director of East Bay MUD Utility Executive Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Marguerite?
Thanks again for the opportunity to speak tonight. Over my last 8 years, I focused on keeping the promises that I've made, and I've kept them. As a result, I've earned the support of the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters of the East Bay, the Alameda and Contra Costa Democratic Party, the Central Labor Councils of both Alameda and Contra Costa, the Building Trades Councils of Alameda and Contra Costa County, Senator Nancy Skinner, current and former East Bay MUD members, majorities of most of the city councils in the district that I represent. That's because I know how to get things done. I am an activist and an advocate. I know water quality, I know investments, and I will keep doing that job in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you for our candidates for running for this office and for their participation this evening. And thank you to our audience participants and your interest in making informed choices. Your local leagues also participate in Voters Edge, an online resource. It's a collection of candidates' information. We encourage you to view the candidates' resumes, platforms, and positions there. That web address is votersedge.org. Your local league will also be hosting numerous additional forums for local candidates who will be on your ballot. Please visit your local league's website using the links you see on the screen. And that will also be, you'll see a poll, and that will also be posted in the chat box. There you can find information about these upcoming forums, including how to attend and how to submit questions in advance. You can also access recordings of previous forums there. Members of the League of Women Voters do the hands-on work to defend democracy and empower voters. While we never endorse a candidate, we're directly involved in shaping important issues to keep our community strong. If you would like to be involved with the women and men making democracy work for everyone, it's easy to join the League. You can register to vote online through October 24th at 5 p.m. Same-day registration is available in person through Election Day, November 8th. Ballots will begin to be mailed starting October 10th. You can vote in person, by mail, or place your ballot in an official Alameda County ballot drop box. And please remember to cast your ballot on or before Election Day, November 8th. Encourage your family, friends, and neighbors to vote. If you haven't already, please respond to the very quick 2-question poll that you should see on your screen. The League values your feedback. You'll also receive a 1-question survey in your browser window after you leave this webinar. Please take a moment to give us your written feedback. Thank you. This officially ends our forum.